Hi everyone, welcome! Inside these black tubs, as you can see, we've got a nice collection of black gold vermicompost that was nudged off to the side in each of these bins 12 days ago so that we can make space here on the edge and set these little guys up with a horizontal migration feeding zone in each system in the hopes that we could try to lure them out of their finished vermicompost and get them over onto this edge of the bin where we can round them up and move them on. Over the past 12 days, I have checked in 4 separate times to try to aerate this material and allow whatever material that was out on the surface that's gotten a little dry over the past few days to be sunken down and then bring some of the more damp stuff up. I must admit, the stuff is still holding on to its moisture considerably. Lots of worms still hanging out in the material as well, so we're nowhere near ready for haul out, but I figured after 12 days they're probably ready for a little bit more food. So I got some stuff to throw into those horizontal migration feeding zones to keep the process moving. So let's get these systems up on the bench and get to feed them. So now this cantaloupe melon rind that I was going to use is chopped up into pretty small sized pieces. So I've got some napkin here. I took a few napkins and I tore them into these little squares. And I thought I would use these to wrap the food into these little sort of bedding bundles. It's not a whole lot of bedding, but hopefully we're going to be still okay with the bedding that was used 12 days ago to build the horizontal migration feeding zones. From what I remember, we built pretty spacious horizontal migration feeding zones, which means there should be sufficient bedding in here already that we might not even need to worry too much about bedding, but I'm just keeping to the concept of it being a best practice to add bedding with feedings. But you know, before we examine what's going on there, let me just show you what I've been doing on 4 occasions since the last time we checked in on these systems together and started the migration. I would come back in here every so often and just aerate. And even though it was only yesterday that I did it, I guess we could do it one more time and take whatever material's out here on the surface. Even though it's only had 1 day to dry, we'll be submerging that slightly drier material down and mixing it with presumably more damp material that's down low, and at the same time more damp stuff that's down low is being brought out to the surface where hopefully it too can get a little access to the air and have the ability to lose some of its moisture to evaporation. And I gotta say, in a way, it does seem to me almost as if the material is starting to crumble a lot more easily than it did, say, a few check-ins ago when I came into Aerate. Quite a bit fewer large chunks, but then again, every time I do encounter a large chunk, my main mission is to make sure that it's not staying as a big chunk and fragment it into smaller pieces. And that's pretty much all I've been doing, you know, nothing too fancy. So what we just did right there is probably about twice as much as I even intended to do here, since, like I said, these systems both got aerated yesterday. But as long as we did it for one, we might as well do it for the other and be fair. And I can't remember now, but I did sort of have this sense as if one of these systems might have been a little bit drier already and coming along a little bit better, and it might have been this one, you know, because it does seem like I might be noticing somewhat fewer worms in the material, and it does seem to crumble and flow perhaps a little bit more readily than what we saw in bin number 1. But I would say that for the most part they're almost the same. They're both still quite damp and still, you know, maintaining a environment which I would say the worms would consider pretty comfortable to be still hanging out in. But then again, you got to admit, if you're a worm and you're just out for a little, you know, roam around the system to see what you can bump into, and you end up over on that side of the cardboard divider, well, there you've got a whole bunch of nice fresh bedding versus what you were just in, which is virtually free of any new bedding after we spent 69 days in these systems foraging. And not to mention that, this is where we were feeding. So 12 days later, I am definitely curious to see what kind of a turnout we have, considering that the number of worms we observed out in the vermicompost does seem to be diminishing. Well, there is a lot of bedding here, so at least we're in good shape from that perspective. And as we're airing it up, it's going to kind of fluff up a bit and occupy a lot more space. It's funny, like my fingers definitely bumped into something very clearly different from the paper cardboard. And it was this little jumble of worms here that I've already kind of disrupted to the point where I've disbanded them and they're just scattering due to my disruption. Sorry, guys. This material here definitely doesn't need an aeration. We should just proceed with placing in the nice new stuff, which I've always, for whatever reason, wanted to position on the far end, you know, so that if they do wander out there just for that purpose, but still feel like the material is still kind of not broken in very much, and they're happy to get the food from there, but don't want to remain there. Perhaps they'll start wandering back in this direction, but then they'll find stuff that already over the past 12 days or whatever day it might be in the near future, it's already had a chance to become cozy enough that worms would probably end up in there and find it stuff that they like being in and just stay put rather than ending up back out here in the finished vermicompost. As far as moisture content goes, it does feel pretty comfortable, although in a way it feels like it could even use more moisture. And adding more would be easy enough since my spray bottle's here. So, if I don't forget, feels like I got to qualify these sort of harebrained ideas before I end up forgetting and just kind of fulfill the prophecy of the airhead worm farmer. So, let's see. The way I did this was I think I took 4 burrito wraps for each system. Yeah, that's what we got there. So that means we should be able to, what's this? Oh, there's a half a pair in here too. Okay, well, perhaps that's the one thing that'll stand on its own with just maybe one little chunk of other next to it. But hopefully we've got another similar one for bin number 2, maybe not. Oh well. Sometimes that's just the luck of the draw when it comes to feeding your wormies. There's not always a perfect fair split down the middle. Sometimes one bin gets a nice little treat and the other one unfortunately has to wait until the next go around and hopefully gets taken care of in that future check-in. So certainly not a lot of bedding, I'll admit. Just adding a little bit, tiny bit in here in the form of a little wrap, pretty much in contact with the foods that they're getting, making me believe that, you know, this bedding, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't stand a chance. Since it's pretty much in contact with melon. So it's going to become like melon juice soaked paper, which I'm sure the worms would pretty much see as the same thing as food, basically. And don't forget, we've also got a couple days worth of coffee that we're going to be getting rid of at the same time. And that's the reason I wasn't so concerned about just sort of tilling in the feeding zone indicators that were resting out here from before, because I've got replacements. But yeah, what you saw in the beginning, before I started moving everything around, was just a couple coffee filters resting out here on top, and when we're done, these coffee filters that we've got over here will be deployed now as the replacement feeding zone indicators for our horizontal migration feeding zone. And we're even sort of insulating our frozen foods from the wormies so that they don't accidentally bump into something a little bit too chilly for their liking. They could just turn around and walk away and come back in a few minutes after the stuff's had a chance to thaw out and become comfortable enough to begin feasting on. So that to me looks like really nice setup. And after 12 days, you know, I'm really glad to see that I'm finally beginning to notice a little bit of exodus out of the castings, because at least the first couple times, maybe even the first 3 times I came in here to aerate, it seemed like there was just so many worms remaining in the material. But the aerating of the material and stirring it around must be helping, because today I did somehow sense that perhaps we've got a little bit less of a crowd remaining over here, and that perhaps our depopulation of the vermicompost is in fact heading in the direction that we want it to, or at least that's just the way it seems to me. Maybe I'm just an optimist. Who knows? What do you think? I mean, you weren't here actually to see what I saw, so I guess you guys wouldn't be able to comment on that, so whatever. But still, you can comment on what you think about the video, because hopefully you liked it, because if you did, besides commenting, please also remember to leave a quick thumbs up, because that's always really appreciated. And if you haven't considered doing that yet, but haven't and might do it, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.